So we'll go ahead and start the meeting, and I'll ask, is there anyone who wants to do minutes for us? Please raise your hand or unmute and say, yeah, me. Okay, Gabrielle, you're it. Thank you very much for offering. And so we'll go ahead and start right with Chad. Chad is from Seattle Public Utilities. He'd been out about 3 years ago to talk to us when we had some of the departments come out and just talk about their general preparedness plans, because it gives you as a hub captain or a person within your community some sense of what Seattle Public Utilities plan is, what their capabilities are, where they are in their planning process, and whatever other surprises Chad wants to bring to us. So go ahead and share your screen. I don't think I'm sharing at all, so you should be able to take it.
Sure, I'll do it in just a second. First off, I just want to say thanks for having me. That's a little bit different since we're all on Zoom. I really hope everybody's staying healthy, and that even though things are kind of tough and weird right now, that you all are doing what you need to do to kind of get by. And maybe this can be kind of a great, interesting opportunity for both sides of this, me and all of you, to kind of learn something. So I'll get into the presentation and share it in just a minute. But the way that I hope this goes today is that what I'll do is I'll share a little bit of, hopefully not too much death by PowerPoint, but at least visually you all can kind of see what Seattle Public Utilities is all about, how we respond in general, and then maybe we can talk about some specific hazards. And then what I'd like to do is turn that PowerPoint slide presentation off and get back on with the camera, kind of the Zoom face-to-face, and leave some time for you all to grill your kind of friendly local neighborhood utility emergency manager about anything that you want to. I think that that's a really important aspect of this. I'll do my best to answer what I can about Seattle Public Utilities. I'm definitely dangerous enough to pretty much get you an answer on most of the stuff dealing with us, and then I can talk about how we coordinate as needed with some of the other departments or regional entities. So a disclaimer here, there are 3 children age 5 to 10 years old in the house with me. So if you hear what sounds like Jurassic Park at some point, don't worry, that's normal. I'm not pretending like there's not some kind of carnivorous action going on. That's just how I live my life here. But I believe they're downstairs doing something not close by. But just a caveat on that. And with that, Cindy, I'll go ahead and start clicking.
Okay.
And start to share my screen here. And you'll see my head disappear in just a minute here. Okay. Cindy, how does that look?
That looks good. Thank you.
Oh yeah, so this is our communications branded front cover here. So this is going to be an emergency management overview for all of you. And we'll get right into it. So before I start showing my lack of PowerPoint presentation skills, what I'll do is just give a quick overview. So Seattle Public Utilities is plural for a reason. And every once in a while people say, oh, you do emergency management for SPU. We're so grateful that you keep the lights on, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, wait, hold on. That's not quite what we do. Those are our friends over at Seattle City Light. But a lot of people think of power first. So we do drinking water, and then we do drainage and wastewater, and also solid waste. And then, of course, everything that comes along with those 3 separate, we call them lines of business, but to everybody else, they're just kind of utilities, like a solid waste utility, a drinking water utility, and then a drainage and wastewater utility. So between those 3 things, we're quite busy sometimes when kind of the regular hazards of the Seattle area impact us. And I'll also talk a little bit about how we extend beyond the city of Seattle. So what you're looking at in the background of the photo that's on there is actually the Cedar River watershed. And that is out past North Bend, and I'm sure many of you have hiked Rattlesnake Ledge, but our footprint is quite different than most city departments in the fact that we extend kind of throughout the county and out into some rural areas and through cities as well. So with that, a little bit more about me. I've been working for SPU for about 13 years. I did my first 5 years in the SPU Operations Response Center, which is basically our dispatch center with a little bit of system control mixed in there. We did security monitoring as well. So after the first 5, I've spent the past 8 years in emergency management, primarily doing training and exercise, but with my supervisor, Ned Worcester, who used to be the program manager, now promoted to the division director of RQA. I am at least filling in the interim as our program manager and leading the staff of 3 that exists there. So a little bit of updates in the org chart that you'll see there, but that's where we're at right now. Before that, I have some experience in crisis counseling at, it should say, Downtown Emergency Service Center, at the 1811 East Lake Project, working with folks that are suffering from substance abuse and that are.
Hey, Chad.
Yeah, what's up?
So you for some reason, when you lean forward, we lose
Sure.
your audio a little bit.
Oh, how's this? I'll stay backwards.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I'm in the sweet spot. We'll see what's going on there. Okay, and then prior experience, I was a volunteer firefighter for Eastside Fire and Rescue for a number of years. I have a lot of experience with the Red Cross across all the different things that they do nationally and locally. I also did heavy infrastructure construction to pay for college. And then right before I worked for the city of Seattle at SPU, I was an elections troubleshooter and designed, helped design kind of how elections looked post Rossi Gregoire era. So a little bit of elections development troubleshooting there. Spent some time down in Olympia working with a senator to do some policy analysis as well. So lots of local stuff here. You know, from the Seahawks parade, I've been involved in when they won the Super Bowl, as well as like the local snowstorms and things like that. Major disaster responses, 2011 Alabama tornadoes that killed over 350 people with 3 EF5 tornadoes. Went down with the Red Cross for that and was a national spokesperson for the Red Cross during Hurricane Sandy, doing crisis communications when they were getting criticized by some national and international media. And I was the deputy planning section chief in the Snohomish County EOC for a few weeks up during the OSO slide a few years back. So other than emergency management stuff, I mentioned I have 3 kids. I love to coach soccer, especially the littles you can see in the picture there, and to paddleboard. And then the last picture there is me evaluating a joint exercise we do with the fire department every couple years on trench rescue. So 3 of the things I love the most up there as we get into the presentation here. So lots of text on this slide. That's our mission and vision and standard planning goals. Really, I'm going to call out a couple words here in particular. In the overview, it says we leverage resources, capabilities, and information to assure SPU's ability to provide core services. Kind of especially when customers and the community need us most. That's after a major emergency or disaster. So when we say the emergency management unit leverages resources, we don't really control a whole lot of anything as emergency managers, but we do a lot of connecting, a lot of facilitating among those 3 utilities, and then between SPU and especially our city partners and regional partners as well. So when we talk about standard planning goals, these really look like a lot of incident command system priorities, right? And so that's really a cornerstone of how we do business at SPU Emergency Management. And right up top, those first 4 or 5 in particular come right out of the FEMA ICS handbook, like right out of Incident Command System 101 or 100. I'm sure many of you have taken that or know about that system. So we protect public health and safety through our services. Incident stabilization, I kind of think of the Hippocratic Oath a little bit here, which means don't make things worse. If you can't make them better, at least stabilize things. Then we talk about property preservation. That's both public property and infrastructure as well as private property. And then especially at Seattle Public Utilities, we have a real leadership role when it comes to safeguarding the environment through surface water quality and spill response and kind of source control when it comes to hazardous materials releases that don't endanger life and health. That's really the fire department's job, and then we back them up. Down there a little bit lower, you see service equity and community and economic viability, especially during right now when we have the pandemic response going on. Things like economic viability and reliance on our services become really, really important. And then on the right side, you can see our principles. You know, just give a quick gander at that. I don't think we need to spend too much more time on those. So really, this is what the emergency management cycle looks like. This is standard for all emergency managers. preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. And we can talk a little bit about that, but what I really want to call out here is that the majority of what our group does, the bulk of what SPU emergency management does is really been planning, and then training and exercising plans, and then using our logistics or resource management function to really make sure that we have the stuff that we need to make those plans go. So this is kind of what it looked like, at least until my boss got promoted. He provided that program leadership. And then we have three kind of other areas of logistics and resource management is my coworker Ty. And on the other side, we have Eileen Newell, who does our planning and community outreach. And then me on the bottom, up until more recently, doing mostly training and exercise, which gives me a really great opportunity to work with everybody across SPU. So that's kind of a quick overview of what our program looks like and kind of our mission and vision stuff. I'll talk about plans first. And I don't know if we can zoom in, but if not, I'll kind of describe things here. But really our planning efforts mirror what it looks like when you all might see us out responding to things, right? So external to our program are really big plans like the City of Seattle Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. And since we extend outside the city, we really play a role in kind of the King County regional framework, including some of their plans as well. And then we get into kind of the operational components. So the City of Seattle Office of Emergency Management consolidates an emergency operations plan, which is really describing how the city will respond to any and all kinds of emergency using an all hazards approach. It means that the thing document and plan for in exercise can apply to anything that happens from a storm to even a pandemic or an active shooter or even a cyber attack. There's some real commonalities that we focus in on. For SPU in particular, the real core of our planning process starts when we identify the hazards that can impact the utility. And we use the Seattle SHIVA, the Seattle Hazard Identification and Vulnerability Analysis, but we also do our own just because our geographic footprint is different. And often because of the technical nature of utilities, we are impacted by hazards that kind of public safety or other types of departments aren't. So the hazard identification and vulnerability analysis really tells us the what bad things we need to plan for. And then we get into some of the all hazards response plans that we have. Those are things like, what do we do if the water quality is contaminated? How do we pick up debris from a variety of hazards? How do we distribute emergency drinking water? What do we do if there's not enough water to go around? How do we do things like curtail or ask people to conserve and at what phases? And then we really roll into some of the hazard specific stuff. So we use all hazards approach until there's something different about a hazard that requires us to do things a little bit different. So if you could zoom in with some binoculars there, you'll see that there's a spill response plan, there's earthquake plans, things that we do for landslides, wet weather readiness and response, freeze response. And even a few years back, we have this thing that we keep up called the West Nile virus plan. So those are specific to hazards, right, that have been identified. And then moving down low, we have things that are called site-specific response plans. And the best example of that's probably the dam emergency action plans, which are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And you can see why those would need to be site-specific, because dams are big, high impact structures that if they fail, there's tremendous community risk, and there's extra documentation and exercise that goes into those. Then there's some other things that we plan or use to augment our plans, which are we call functional annexes, crisis communications and public information, how we staff an incident, and things like that. So finally, we record things like mutual aid agreements, contact lists, quick reference plan summaries, which are kind of the rip and run, grab and go things that people can get really familiar with quickly and not read through. Some of these plans can be quite large. I think the dam EAPs that we have are measured in kind of inches or pounds instead of pages because of the level of details required. Great. So I know there's a lot up there. It may be better because we're on Zoom if we save things till the the end for questions, but if something burning comes up, if you see, Cindy, something that I can't that you think would be helpful to answer either through chat or something like that, just holler. So I talked a little bit about our planning part of our program. I'll talk about logistics too. This is how we resource plans. We have somebody in charge of this, and we work really closely with our fleets and warehouse division to really make sure that we're supplying our responders, in particular the people working in the field with the supplies and equipment, and even personal protective equipment that they need to do their job safely and efficiently. Some examples of this program in action are our sandbag program. Every wet season, which starts about October, we have 4 or 5 different sites that we deploy sandbags to. People can take a certain number free of charge, and we position these in flood-prone areas. Something else our logistics program does is maintain our department operations center. So many of you are familiar, of course, with the Emergency Operations Center down there, kind of around 5th and Washington. Many of the large operating departments have something that looks similar, but it's not citywide, so we call it a department operations center, and we have a lot of technology that goes into those so we can communicate, as well as down to the floor plan of where people will sit to staff different incident command system or incident management team positions. And also within our logistics program is our radio and telecommunications program. SPU manages about 1,000 mobile or portable radios for our staff to use during emergencies as well as day-to-day. A lot of that programming and inventory is done through our emergency management program as well. Cruising along through the last piece of our program here, training and exercise. You got to have plans to train and exercise too. This is a sample of what our base exercise and training program looks like. We do quarterly exercises, usually organized around incident command system functions, finance, logistics, operations, or planning, as well as the command staff functions. So we exercise things like public information and safety, and even our liaison functions, which we primarily do through the city's Emergency Operations Center. So those are some of the exercises, and then the core of our training really is around incident command system, federal curriculum. We do a lot of it in person. Incident Command System 100, 200, and 700, which is a standard that lots and lots of SPU employees take. I think the last check I had, we had over 800 employees trained at some level in Incident Command System. And then of course, it goes up to the 300 level and 400 level, depending on the level of leadership the employee is going to have to take on. And then we repeat that every year, basically just like college courses. You move up through the system, and there's a training plan for both line employees that are emergency responders, as well as our executive team, up to and including General Manager Mamihara. So I'll do kind of adjust the facts about each one of our lines of business, and then I'll give a quick overview of how we respond. So first, drinking water. We supply drinking water to a large portion of King County, 1.5 million people, an average about 130 million gallons per day. That's about 54 million gallons a day retail, and then the remaining balance is wholesale customers. And then really that's cities or water districts that we sell water to so that they can provide it to their customers and communities downstream of us. So on the high end, on a hot day where people are watering and stuff, we get up over 200 million gallons per day. And then on a wet day in November or so, we can drop below 100 million gallons per day. That's a lot of pipe that we have, over 1,800 miles of pipe. Between the Tolt and Cedar reservoirs up in the foothills of the Cascades, it's about 31 billion gallons of storage at 2 main reservoirs, not to mention the 13 or so smaller in-town distribution reservoirs that we have. In those in-town reservoirs, after the water's been primarily treated, it's about 355 million gallons of treated storage. And then we run one of the only state certified water quality labs down on Airport Way South. So when something bad happens to our drinking water system, emergencies happen all the time. We get usually 1 or 2 water main breaks or leaks per day. Those responses are emergencies, but they're not a big deal, and I'm doing the air quotes here. because our standard resources and the people we have on duty every day can handle them. Those are field supervisors and crew chiefs working with the Operations Response Center, where I used to work, in the Operations Control Center, just to handle it. You know, turn the water off, dig it up, fix the pipe, turn the water back on, bury it, repair the street with SDOT. And that's a real example of kind of your run-of-the-mill emergency. But at times we get more large scale or geographically widespread things that happen, and we have to do things like activate the Department Operations Center or work with our city department friends over at SDOT or City Light to make sure that we can staff up, do things a little bit different, shift gears to take care of whatever's going on, whether it's a freeze response or a large water main break that results in depressurization of the system, and we have to issue a boil water advisory until we can test and sample the water to make sure that it's safe for everybody to drink again. So plans that they have, some sample ones: pressure loss and water quality, water shortage contingency. That can be due to either contamination or things like drought. We've had a few of those where we've had to ask people to conserve water. You know, every 5 or 6 years we get some low snowpack, and we refer to the snowpack up in the Cascades for us as kind of our third reservoir that fills up the 2 lakes that people are more familiar with. They have a freeze response plan. By February 2019, or even this last February, we get some snow and temperatures drop. We need to shift how we do business and respond to emergencies to keep both our employees safe, and really make sure that we can control leaks. Everybody knows that a big water main break on the middle of Queen Anne Hill when it's 15 degrees outside only makes things better for the sledders and not anybody actually trying to get around the city. So we do things like get people out of trucks and put them on foot patrol and give everybody freeze kits and chains on the trucks as well. We also have an emergency water distribution plan. That's something all of you are probably pretty interested in, and that's if we can't provide water to our regular customers using our system, we have some limited capability to go to hardened hydrants or basically fill up large bags of water called blivets or pump directly from a treated reservoir to really get some water out to customers for drinking and basic sanitation. We'll cruise right on to drainage and wastewater here. There's kind of the mileage that we have both for drainage pipe, and that's basically stormwater, rainwater, and the wastewater. That's the kind that we flush down the toilet or goes down the sink, right? So you can see the mileage there and the number of actual assets that we have to maintain. And one that I'll call out in particular is the 33,733 catch basins located throughout the city. And every time somebody calls SPU during a storm and says, hey, there's a pond on the corner of whether it's 4th and Stewart or 107th and Midvale, sometimes it's these catch basins that are plugged up or an inlet's plugged up. So it takes quite a bit of preventative maintenance and quite a robust response to try and keep both traffic moving and that water out of people's homes as well. So we'll take a quick look. You can kind of see basically what I'm trying to get across is just the number of assets that we take care of, and this is just in town in Seattle for drainage and wastewater. So again, for most field responses, those single incidents are usually handled by crew chiefs, field supervisors, our standard dispatch and system control centers. A run-of-the-mill emergency for drainage and wastewater really looks like something like a real nasty sewer backup. Maybe you've got sewage blowing up toilets in the basements of an entire city block. Our first response crews and our repair crews are more than capable of handling that and making sure that they get that taken care of, whether it's installing a pump and bypass or relieving a blockage on their own. A great example of a large scale or geographically widespread event for drainage and wastewater really would be your rain event. You know, those atmospheric rivers that run in. We have quite a robust forecasting capability. We have an in-house meteorologist. His name is James Rufo-Hill. He does a great job. We're also attached at the hip with the Weather Service in the week or so leading up to some of these major events to make sure that we know as it gets closer exactly when it's going to start to rain for us, and we can staff up ahead of time and then geographically deploy our drainage and wastewater response resources accordingly. So plans and protocol there. We have a real robust wet weather readiness and response plan. We use geographic divisions, and that little map on the side there, you can see some lines slicing up the city. We basically slice the city up and put somebody in charge of each chunk, right? So it's a lot easier to eat a giant pizza. You know, if you don't have to manage it all by yourself, you can really slice it up into smaller pieces of pizza, and get one to everybody. You can take care of things a lot faster. And that map's a great representation of that. That map is called the Field Operations Mapping System. We call it FOMS lovingly. We made it in-house. And during a storm, it looks similar to what you see on the screen right there. Lots of trucks going around. Those little dots and things are all bad things that have happened to our drainage and wastewater system. And the trucks are going and being dispatched through incident management out to those work orders assigned to assets, and we know when they're complete. And so as soon as you start to see the trucks not moving as much and all those little dots going away, you know that we're starting to stabilize the incident, or it's starting to rain a lot less on it. But it's a great tool that we have. And then last, we have solid waste. Some big numbers that we have: 2 transfer stations, north and south transfer station, commercial and residential garbage plus self-haul. That's a little bit low, that citywide recycling rate. I think the latest may be around 60% now for citywide, and you can see it improves with the single family residents there. One really important thing to know about solid waste is that when you see the garbage trucks come by, of course, that's a contract that we manage. It's Recology or Waste Management that comes and picks it up. And one of the main things that Seattle Public Utilities does is really influence those contracts, help develop them, and work with our contractors on a daily basis to make sure that we don't have a lot of missed pickups, and that the trash goes away from people's houses, and that we want to recycle it or reduce the amount of waste that people are making. So for response, on site, most of our field employees that actually work for SPU work at our transfer stations, north and south transfer stations. And those are places where a lot of people come through. There are people doing residential home improvement that maybe haven't been to the dump before. So there's safety issues there when they mix with some of the commercial haulers, even though we do our best to separate them. We also have a lot of pile fires because people like to throw away everything from hazardous materials that catch on fire later when they're mixed up to even ammunition that we found that people found, you know, from grandpa's old World War II days, and as they're cleaning it out as an estate sale, they just dump it in the trash because there's no way that big shell could be live. But we found them before, and that creates quite the response as well. So that's what happens at the transfer stations. Most of that's happened by the field crews or partnering with Seattle Fire and sometimes Seattle Police, depending on the incident there. For them, anytime there's an incident that disrupts mobility for solid waste, we're going to have issues with collection. And that includes freezing, snow, all of that. And we can even have issues when there's labor disruption, when our contractors are also negotiating with the haulers and their collective bargaining groups there. So it really requires close coordination and a lot of communication. We do our best to let people know about their collection status using everything from traditional media to social media and Nextdoor and even Alert Seattle. Maybe some of you have gotten either opt-in messages or messages from us about your solid waste collection because it's been snowing and we're not able to pick it up. So in addition to just picking up the trash and operating the transfer stations, if there was something like an earthquake or a really huge storm and debris is piling up and blocking the streets, and there's just not enough capacity at the transfer stations to take care of it, we own the debris management plan for the city. And really what this looks like is a big, robust plan that involves 2 national level contractors, SAIC and Tetra Tech. One is responsible for actually picking up the debris or pushing it out of the way so that people can get to where they need to go on the arterials, and the other is actually to monitor it, right? So we get charged by the ton, just like when you take it to the transfer station. So we have a contractor that's assigned just to monitor and track how much debris is actually being managed. So You can see the plans there, the contracts themselves. We require our haulers to have continuity of operations plans. They've done a pretty good job so far. I'm knocking on wood here. During the pandemic, I don't think we've missed too many pickups related to bench staffing for our contractors and haulers. So we continue to stay in close contact with them. We have the debris management plan and then the on-site safety procedures at the transfer station. So we have the 3 lines of business. We just went through drinking water, drainage and wastewater, and solid waste. And then we have kind of the corporate functions associated with that. As you can imagine, there's a big finance and administration group. We have corporate communications and public information, customer response in our contact center where people call for information about our services. We have policy and strategy so we can work across the street at City Hall and even with King County elected officials and even at the state. Regulatory liaisons for everything from our pollution discharge permits for sewer overflows to being regulated by the Department of Health as well. Project delivery and engineering is all the construction that we do, in addition to all the technical expertise required to build and operate and maintain our systems. And then, of course, we work with Seattle IT, and we have a small staff of technology experts within SPU as well.
Hey,
So,
Chad.
yeah.
Chad. Hey, Chad.
Yep, I'm here.
There's a couple of hands raised, and so they were back when you were covering your statistics. Do you want to take questions at the end or take them now before you get too far away from those?
No, let's stop for a little break. I mean, I've been talking for quite a while. Let's catch up and let some people talk as well here.
Okay, first question's from Carl Leon.
Hi, Chad. Good to see you again.
Hey, Carl, I recognize your voice. I can't see you right now, but I'm glad you're there.
Chad and I spent a year going to meetings before Cascadia 2016.
Yes.
A question on your horizontal infrastructure. What happens after a really big earthquake, like a magnitude 7 or above? We've seen what happened in Christchurch. Have you got projections of what Seattle is going to experience? How old is that infrastructure?
I'll answer it in the general way first. And the answer is it's old. It's really old, especially in certain areas. We're talking 100 years old, right? So we do have some modeling. If you're really interested in it, Carl, I think somewhere still pretty high on SPU's web page is the executive summary of our seismic study, at least on the water side, the drinking water side. And the results of that show that in a large earthquake, and we have a few different models there of specific impacts that we're really damaged, especially if the lines that come into the north end and the south end of the city end up failing. They're incredibly hard to repair, and it's not something like where we can dig up the street downtown when your water service breaks in a couple hours and turn it back on. Some of those, a temporary repair in and of itself takes 2 to 4 weeks, right? So in a worst case scenario, we're talking weeks with most of our customer base, even in the city, plus our wholesale customers, not having full access to potable drinking water. And I think that, I don't think we need to go much further on the dire summary of that, but just to give you the status of what the system looks like with no seismic improvement. We have a plan for it, right? But as stuff gets older, those numbers are not going to get better. Granted, when we did the seismic study, we really wanted to know with a worst case scenario. So it's a huge earthquake, really close with an epicenter of downtown Seattle. And we assumed the worst in every situation on that model. So that's like where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would have made an action movie about it. That's kind of what we talk about in that executive summary. There's a couple other models that show much less impact to the system, but SPU has always been pretty conservative when it comes to planning for those types of things, and we wanted to let people know what it would take and what we would need to build a resilient system, starting now with investments over the next decades.
And without going into detail, I'm going to guess that the wastewater side, the sewage side is going to be about the same as the potable water side.
Really, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the answer is yes. That's also super old, right? And the standards of materials used for wastewater systems or drainage systems they're not as tough as water pipes, right? Things made out of clay pipe and things like that are not going to perform well, especially when long-side sewer laterals connect into the wastewater pipe in the middle of the street, and they're just about as old. We're right in the middle of a seismic study on the wastewater side. It's not common for wastewater utilities to really do detailed seismic studies. We're lucky we have an in-house resource to be able to do that type of work. One of the challenges on the wastewater side is there's much less accuracy, I think, in some of the records. So we're having to do some really fancy modeling to account for where all this stuff has been put in.
Okay, I've got a question from Jack Herndon.
Hi, Jack, go ahead.
Got to unmute. Jack, I just unmuted you.
Yeah, I got it. What I was wondering when you were discussing the areas, different areas, divided the city into different areas for your normal everyday response. One of the earlier discussions we had with somebody from Seattle Office of Emergency Management was recognition of the city being divided into sections related to primary transportation structures failing. Is your division of the city taking that into account for emergency response?
In short, yes, right? So if we look at the way that we like to slice up the map for most storm response, we have 4 sections north of the Ship Canal and then 4 south of the Ship Canal. And to try and divide it based on any transportation structure that might fail, I don't know exactly what they're trying to do with Seattle OEM because there's 167 bridges or so, but what we did, because we know we only needed about 4 north and 4 south, is we took the Ship Canal and like the Duwamish and then basically Aurora and 99 and used that to kind of slice things up. So we don't get much more detail than there's big water in between or a large high-rise structure, maybe even like I-5 or 99 in certain parts.
Okay.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so that gave you a little bit of a break.
Okay, great. Let's keep going. So we talked about the lines of business individually, but right, like Carl brought up the Cascadia subduction zone, right, or a pandemic. It impacts all of SPU's mission essential functions at once, right? So we don't have the luxury of just pulling water staff in or drainage and wastewater or solid waste like we do for some other emergencies. Like a water main break only requires drinking water resources. That makes it much more straightforward. With the complexity of 3 lines of business, we use an incident staffing model that makes 1 incident management team out of people from across our lines of business and corporate functions. And I think probably the best way to show it is the first example here I have is from the Cascadia exercise that Carl and a number of other folks were involved in. And if you look close, you can see that especially in our operations and planning unit, we put 1 person in charge of the whole section, but there are people from all the different lines of business or separate utilities represented in each one. You can see in our agency representatives, even though our department operations center is fairly large, it gets full pretty quickly when we start having our wholesale customer representatives. Perhaps King County Water District 90 wants to come in, and we also have a regional engineer come in from the Department of Health. They perform 2 functions. 1, make sure we're fulfilling our regulatory responsibility, in addition to acting as a technical expert and working as a member of our team. You can see some of the support functions in there as well. Our EOC liaisons And the way that that works is we send a liaison to the Emergency Operations Center anytime something bad has happened to us. That also requires the activation of the EOC. And we also have a liaison stationed at our incident command post or our Department Operations Center, so it acts as a pipeline. So some of you may have been into the Seattle EOC and sat at the infrastructure branch pod where all the desks are. We'll have a representative in that seat. We'll also have somebody performing almost an identical function in our Department Operations Center. And they have one job on both ends, and that's to transfer information back and forth and to listen to the things that might impact us or ways that we can help some of our partner departments. So quite a few people. These are just the folks on the incident management team. It of course doesn't account for the hundreds of operations staff and others that are working underneath each of those operations branches. So it's fairly complex. Because we're responding still right now, I brought just a sample of what this looks like for our COVID-19 response. Obviously, with things not being broken for SPU to fix, we have a lot more planning staff or continuity staff assigned to this, as well as some specialists up in our command staff as well to be able to either communicate with the mayor's office, develop HR policy, make sure that we have correct guidance on the safety end and are hooking up with our industrial hygienist and public health. But it's kind of an example of something. This looks like it was from just a few days ago, April 20th. Some quick numbers, and this is just the top part of what we have, which is called an incident briefing that goes out every operational period. So after it's over, we went through some of the preparedness stuff with our programs. Response, here's recovery. Recovery at the City of Seattle really is a citywide activity. Obviously, our infrastructure restoration, that blends from response into recovery. So this includes both reconstruction of the things that broke. We might be able to make temporary repairs, but at some point they're either going to need to be replaced, and they might not be replaced in exactly the same way that we built them in the first place. So you can imagine that we may have some different ideas when we finally get the chance to upgrade or replace some of the stuff that's 100 years old. Some of the thinking and pipe material has changed, especially when it's come to things like seismic resistant pipe. And in addition, an example of this is we have a tremendous number of SPU employees fulfilling their work functions from home, remotely, just like we're doing on our Zoom meeting right now. And I think one of the ways to think about recovery is to really think about what the new normal looks like. So I would be surprised if we didn't have some staff really working from home more permanently after this pandemic is over as well. So recovery is both about reconstruction and really learning about what happened and what you can do differently permanently in the future. The last phase here is mitigation. We do a lot of after action review processes. Anytime we have a major exercise or event here, we use Homeland Security's best practices to look back on what we did. We track our improvement actions moving forward. And really, when it comes to the large regional exercises like Cascadia or big events, those are benchmarks for our program. So for example, in Cascadia Rising in 2016, we found that we really needed to improve our logistics capability, our ability to order and acquire supplies, improve contracts, increase mutual aid, and we track that. And I think over the years, we've seen tremendous improvement in our capability to resource incidents and use our internal leadership to be able to make that happen. Mitigation for us is really interesting because most of our core services are mitigation efforts in and of themselves. We've covered reservoirs to make sure people can't put stuff in them. We do surface water control, and those are everything from little berms that SDOT puts in to control stormwater, to replacing culverts, and even restoring fish habitat as well. We do a lot of wildland fire protection out in the watersheds. We have both of our watersheds, I think, if you add up the acreage, are as big as Seattle, Bellevue, Renton, Kent, and Auburn combined. I think it's a little bit bigger than that. So there's like a whole nother huge city's worth of acreage out there that we're in charge of taking care of. So we're into what I think is the more fun part. There's a lot to get through. I wanted to try and familiarize everybody with all the different things we do, and I got to just a small portion of them. But things that you may have questions about are specific hazards, how we might work with our partners in the EOC, if you want me to expound upon that a little more, what our planning process might look like, or even how departments like the one I work for can help groups like you all that are spending your valuable time to try and help out your neighborhoods and communities. So with that, let me see if I can stop sharing my screen so you can see me here. And I'm happy to spend as long as you all would like to answer some questions here.
All right, I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to start. One of the things that we try and think about, you know, we encourage people to store water. We know people won't store water. We saw those maps that came out that showed those pinch points where if certain pipes break, you know, huge chunks of Seattle don't have water. What is your water resupply capacity? You know, I know that the sheltering system has got a goal written that says we want to have our first shelter up in 96 hours. So do you have anything written that's like, we can provide 10,000 gallons within 2 days, or, you know, what can we think about that we're going to have to be jury rigging out here?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we have a certain capacity if we can staff our emergency water distribution plan. So the largest site that we have, it really looks like something similar to a full-fledged community point of distribution, where there's a water manifold hooked up either to a blivet or a hardened hydrant. And it takes, if you add security, traffic control, people filling and maintaining the blivet, it's close to 80 people or so, almost 100 for our largest one at each location, if we're able to set that up, right? So at that point, if we do that, I bet you there's perhaps 100,000 gallons per day or something in that range that we can provide. If you look at that compared to what we usually provide earlier, when I said that during a hot summer day, we're upwards of 200 million gallons per day of consumption. That's not a whole lot. However, you shrink that a lot when it's a gallon per person per day of drinking water. It's still not enough, right? So what we're looking for, I don't think it would ever be feasible for us to say we're going to be able to replace, even for a gallon per person per day, drinking water for basic sanitation and for basic sanitation with blivets and stuff. We don't even have the staff.
Yeah, you gave me kind of like the what are we talking about? And is that 100,000 gallons per location or 100,000 gallons across the city?
I'm going to be conservative and say it's across the city, and it will take probably 48 hours to get those things up and running. All right, and that's not much. At the same time, we expect and have conversations with everybody from Mass Care and Human Services about what that expectation looks like, to the National Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers. And we even worked a bit this last year with the Navy, and they have some different types of equipment in the defense supportive civil authorities sector that make our blivet system look like, you know, me when I was a kid with a super soaker and a water balloon. So that is something where I say we're continuously in the planning phase. This is a tricky place for utilities to be in, right? Water is, our system is a critical lifeline and has to get back up for things like firefighting. That's the #1 priority we have. It's not drinking water. It's restoring fire flow to as many hydrants as fire needs to put out fires after an earthquake. That's our #1 job. And then we work down the priorities till we get to drinking water, which is actually 5, because we want wet water to go to places like critical facilities like hospitals and things before we even get to that. Because chances are, after an earthquake, you're gonna have to boil that for quite a while anyways, or use some other auxiliary treatment.
Matt Blank has his hand up too.
Oh yeah, we'll keep going. That might be a follow-up. So Matt, go ahead.
Sort of, yeah. My question was specifically around like the emergency reserves. For instance, like Roosevelt Reservoir was determined to be necessary to hold on to, but it can't be used because it's not covered for normal distribution. Is that something that is going to be fed back into the water pipes in a situation, or will that be a place where people will come and pick up water?
If there's a hardened hydrant close by, those are the primary places where we're going to look. I believe we still have a map up that's associated with the Seattle Fire and Emergency Response Levy that happened back in 2010-ish, I believe, that shows where those are at. I would say, without being the supervisor of our System Control Center, that where we get reserves from depends a lot. The primary way that we use the redundancy that we have in our system is if you think of our water system as a big wheel, right? Where everything flows downhill from two lakes into the center of the city, right? And it meets in the middle where Colt water from the north and Cedar water from the south fill up and kind of meet in the middle. If one of those supplies is damaged or compromised, we push water from one up a little bit higher or down through the other side. So for example, you might have seen in the news, if you live especially in the south end, that we had a chlorine leak out at our Cedar Water Treatment Plant at Lake Young, which is in kind of the Fairwood area of Renton. That plant was offline for a couple hours, so our system control staff was prepared, if needed, if we weren't able to get it back online, to wheel water from the north end and push it back down through. So there's always extra water in those reservoirs. We can use that head to really move water up and down. And that's a real benefit that Seattle has. We have two large reservoirs, surface water reservoirs, that gives us quite a bit of redundancy compared to other places. Taking a smaller reservoir and pushing it might, I mean, I'm not a system control supervisor, but I would guess that there's other things we would do first that are less stressful to the system and provide more water.
A question about debris removal. In tornado and hurricane country, when people start, moving the debris out of the road or out of their yard so they can get access, it's typically stored on the side of the road. Mm-hmm. Is that the same in Seattle? Do we have a waste debris plan that we ought to have in our hub captain books so that we can help give immediate direction to people who are going like, my stone wall fell down across my driveway and I got to put it somewhere, and I'm hoping debris removal will pick it up. The guy I was talking to was saying it has to be right on the street side and it can't have a break between it and your house, blah, 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 blah. Are there rules we should know about for debris removal?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I don't know about the brick thing and all of that. I think that our debris management plan may be something that's helpful for you all to have. I mean, we're pretty happy to share that type of stuff. One thing I will say is with the debris management plan, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure novel. Right? So, it depends on the amount of tonnage that we think is created, and there's estimates done by our contractor as to what approach will be used. We have agreements with people that have big flat spaces that don't drain into waterways where we can put this stuff. So how we collect and move to those places will depend on who's available at the time. Perhaps the University of Washington is a field hospital, right? And that big flat area is now that instead, and we have to go and move things further south to Port of Seattle parking lot. Or we're going to use a different parks location over at Woodland Park.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally don't want the places. I want the instructions that say, until we find out where it's going to go, separate out the wood from the hazardous waste, or, whatever your contracting rules say is going to be picked up. Because the guy I was talking to said, If they find hazardous waste in with regular house debris, their
It all goes to
contracted
hazardous
crew
waste.
would pick it up, right? So,
They'll pick it up, but they'll just charge us for it all being hazardous waste, even if it's just a little bit.
So
So
we
that's
should-
how that kind of works. And
that's
we
the sort of,
want that, right?
yeah.
But so what I would say is, I think especially that summary, so you know how we operate it, is going to be really important. When it comes to what restrictions we put and what we ask people to do, that's going to be up to General Manager Hara and the mayor at some point. Whether we even take debris off of private property will depend on the severity and possibly whether or not we expect FEMA reimbursement. So again, it's that choose your own adventure piece. I will say that one thing that you can expect is there are 2 phases. One is called cut and toss, and that's basically SDOT using the snow routes, and they grab everything that's in those main arterials that are important. First, you know, the emerald and gold routes, and they just push it off to the side, and it can stay wherever that lands until the contractors show up with the big things to take it out of the way, so that emergency responders and others can get around the city to do life safety and public health work, right? So debris management takes a few days at least to get rolling. And then once they come, there's people that are really good at estimating the amount of debris, you know, how many million yards are we looking at of stuff we need to get rid of? What's the debris profile? Is it dirt like it was in Oso? Is it foliage and trees? Is it rubble and hazmat like after an earthquake? And then they'll set up the sites that are most appropriate that we have pre-identified, and then they'll talk about what it looks like to sort it. And chances are at some point during that process, we are going to use our alerting systems and as well as communicating with people like you to let people know, hey, woody debris, put it over here, you know, and you know, whether it's human waste because the sewer system's out, this is what you should do with that. Is it concrete and rubble? Is it your couch because it's wet? You know, all that kind of stuff. We'll message on that. But I think for you all to have some of the basic stuff will give you an idea as to at least the timeline and the phases that we're looking at.
okay, we'll get that from you, and we'll have you write some injects for our next exercise. And Forrest had her hand up and now it's gone. Anybody else got a hand up? Well, I'm going to keep going. No, I got one more.
Go ahead, Cindy.
In a conference that I was at, I came home from this into COVID, so I have not been able to talk to anybody in emergency management. There's been a kind of a rain barrel that was developed, and you hook it up to your hose system. And the difference between a water collection barrel and this is that it's pressurized. So you always have fresh water flowing through the barrel. But should the water pipes break, you've got, you know, 50 gallons of fresh water sitting outside your house that was captured. And, you know, this is, they use it in the Army. They made it for the military for people, families out on deployment or something like that. But I was going, like, you could put that up to some apartments, you know, and have 3 of them in series and have, you know, 150 gallons for that apartment building. So is there any FEMA mitigation funds, UASI funds for a program like that?
For us to install something on property like that would probably be something that looked like a mechanism closer to like when we were promoting rain barrels.
Yep.
More strongly. And it would probably be local. Because it's installation on private property, I don't think that there would be a FEMA funding mechanism for us to be able to transfer that through. Could we possibly justify that as a preparedness grant, like an emergency management mitigation program funding grant, like something like that? Maybe. It might be a reach. I will say that often with Seattle Public Utilities, we're not big on trying to get a lot of that because the funds that are sliced so thin are not, and the amount of energy we have to get them.
Yeah. I actually wasn't thinking private. I wasn't thinking private property. I was thinking Seattle Housing Authority buildings, the places that don't have the large apartments or a house or anything, but Seattle Housing Authority or other, you know, housing projects where we continually hear people say, I don't have the storage space, I don't have the money to
Oh, yeah.
buy, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk more.
I think so. I think that that is part of a broader piece that I've talked with Matt over at Seattle OEM about quite a bit when they do outreach. Is we tend to, because this is how everybody thinks, and it's easier, I think, sometimes to draw pictures, promote preparedness for the single family house, like the standalone home, right? Like we tell people to use the water in their hot water heaters, and centralized systems are how a lot of people are working. So I think that in addition, I think that the Seattle Housing or King County Housing Authority buildings that are government are a great entry point. But in the end, it's going to be building management companies, right, working with Seattle OEM and subject matter experts like we have at SP and City Light to figure out what that looks like. Because if they're tremendously unprepared, that's horrible. I saw a presentation from a Japanese cohort that came by after the Sendai tsunami and quake, and they showed us footage of what happens when sewer systems fail in high rises, and it's horrible. It's a horrendous thing. So I think that building management companies in particular are something that's a real area of opportunity for us to get a big bang for our buck.
Okay. Nobody else has raised their hand, so I'm going to let you go. If any other things you want to close it. Oh, I do want to recognize you because you were one of the couple of departments in Cascadia Rising that let hub captains come in and observe. And that we had like 4 hub captains go into your departmental EOC so that we could just sit and watch what a department does, how it goes through collecting its information, doing its assessment. So it helps us understand what goes into situation awareness. And so, you know, if we're able to do that again in the upcoming Cascadia Rising 2, that would be fantastic. Thank you for letting us do that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great partnership to continue. And if you all would like us to come out and help either control or write injects, if you're doing something on your own, that's something that we should be doing, right? I think that that's a service that should be available to you all. You know, there's no way that that's not a good use of our time to be able to be out there with all of you.
Yep. Okay. All right, Chad. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we'll follow up with some of these little items.
Okay, that sounds great. And what I'll do as soon as I leave this Zoom meeting is I will attach the slides that just give that brief overview, and I'll send them to you. And feel free to share those as widely as you need to.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. I can't watch hands and talk at the same time. So I just got the chat part answered. Okay. That was great. He's a great partner to work with. It was unbelievable how willing he was to let us come in and just watch them, because it was like they were not polished. It was a very interesting experience, but you learned a lot. So we're going to move on to the agenda. Other stuff, it's kind of the network news business. There's some stuff on COVID. I know that the Homer Hub, Lee's on, she'll probably talk about their Homer Hub Harris COVID supports group that they've got going. I haven't gotten any other emails from anyone letting me know about a neighborhood effort that's been going on. Is there anything anybody has specific that they want to talk? Lee, this would probably be a good point for you to talk about your stuff if you're ready, or anybody else who's got any COVID or city things going on.
Sure, I can do that.
Great.
I'll get my video back on. So yeah, we got the website up. I guess you guys have one too for the recovers.org.
In West Seattle.
Yeah, West Seattle. We're up to about 20 volunteers. We had a good project for them, but well, it's still going forward. We're delivering lunches to the school. From the school, the kids who weren't able to get to the school and pick up their lunches.
So nobody else on the call knows what you actually did.
Oh,
With the website.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It seems like it's been up there for so long. Yeah, we just put up a website. It says, has anybody looked at the recovers.org website? It's just a place for people to say they want to volunteer and also register if they have anything they need.
I'll try and get it up while you're talking.
Oh, okay, great.
Go ahead and keep talking though.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna take me a minute.
So, you know, so, but and then we had to do a bunch of outreach, obviously, so people could see that they would sign up on the website. So I think at this point we have about 20 people volunteering. We had one woman who volunteered to make some masks, one person who needed some masks. But I think, so now we're looking at the same situation that you have in West Seattle. We've got volunteers and we're kind of trying to figure out what we can do with them. But so the school lunch delivery was a great idea. The schools, you know, they're really careful about who delivers to the families, but I mean, I guess these kids are not getting any other food.
Hang on, slow computer here.
Maybe
So-
let me give it a try.
Yeah. So what they've got is they've got a small group of people that formed, oh, here we go, finally, formed this group and used the recovers.org template that we had been researching when we were looking at different ways that community groups were helping. Some groups set up, you know, just ad hoc, you know, quickie websites. This one uses the recovers.org template. So this is the Homer Harris Hub supports. And I'm going to scroll down and there's your thing to let us know if you need a face cloth and who you are. And then a really nice section over on the left-hand side about the standing important links for the community. So I was really impressed by what you guys had done. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to share that.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to figure out how to stop share. There we go.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who was doing COVID stuff? I did have one more thing that I found out about. Remember those who attended the psychological first aid class, Ren Hutchins? He contacted me, apparently about 12 of them across the state in Red Cross volunteers in disaster mental health had gotten together and they created a psychological first aid for COVID first responders workshop. And so it's like 1.5 to 2 hours long, and it's a virtual session. And it's for social service agencies, frontline agencies, anybody who has actually got workers in the way of harm, trying to help the community and exposed to COVID. And so he said they had just finished teaching it to themselves. They were pretty confident of their delivery method. And did I have anybody who might be interested in that? So I was like, City of Seattle, they've just been talking about wanting to make sure they address mental health folks to people. So I sent him to the Department of Neighborhoods. I connected them on Tuesday. He says he hasn't heard back from them. So I'm gonna ping them, but since the city didn't immediately take them up on time, I'm gonna pass them to Bainbridge and Vashon Island, who both have Be Prepared groups. And so if any of you know of social agencies who are reporting that a lot of their workers are having burnout or mental stresses, let me know, because they're looking for audiences to get this out to. We were one of his first contacts to say, do you know anybody out there who might want to use this new session? So that's a new offering for people. Anybody else with anything on COVID? Good, that's an exhausting topic these days. I have gotten every closet cleaned out. You cannot believe it. I'm on my 3rd batch of bread. So we're going to go to Ann now Ann, get ready to unmute for talking about the Hub roll books and our flyer and distribution.
Excellent, thanks. So most of you have seen a version of our flyer. This is the most up-to-date version. It is a trifold. It's lovely. Karen Lewis did it for us. Lots of input, lots of editing by Hub captains. So thank you for everybody that gave us your input. And those are off at the printer. We printed 5,000, I think. So those will be done, I don't know, in the next week or so. So that's a piece of the grant that we had running before all this started. So the next piece is the job descriptions. And I want to thank lots of people for helping put those together, and then a lot of editing. Linda Norland, you were amazing. Gabrielle, same thing. Cindy, tireless numerous hours. Gina Hicks, Karen Beck, Karen Lewis, again, did the brochure. A lot of people were involved in this project. It's been a long time coming. So in general, the job descriptions per job are about 2 pages, you know, front and back. So 1 page front and back. And then we've included a lot of tools that we thought would be useful. We're probably a week, maybe a week out, maybe less, of actually getting those printed. And then I will be sending those out to all the hub captains. So what you will get from me in some kind of a drop off, and I haven't figured that out yet, but is a big stack of papers, a lot of folders. We have, let's see, there's 8 folders, and there's 2 1-inch binders, nothing special, but 1 binder is for the educator. So in the education book, it will be the education job description, and then information that might be helpful to your neighbors when the internet's out and they need to learn things. So again, a lot of people helped us trim that down because I tend to be a little wordy. So anyway, I forget how big the education book is, but it's not massive, and you can always take stuff out or put stuff in depending on what it is you think might be helpful after a disaster. But again, what's in the education book is stuff that we think might be helpful, and the internet is down still. So that's the education book. The other binder is for the hub manager, and it's just because they have a lot of extra paperwork besides just their job description. So you'll get 2 binders, lots of folders, and these are, you know, they have pockets, they have prongs in the middle. You will get a big box of sheet protectors, page protectors. So I will be giving you the paperwork and you will be stuffing. So, and then you'll get a packet of tabs to make some sense out of all this. So that's what I plan on dropping off, like I said, in probably a week, maybe 2 weeks, for you guys to assemble your own with a little bit of guidance. Let's see.
We were going to have a assembly party,
Yeah.
you know, before COVID, so that you got just everything stuffed. And at this point, we kind of went, you know, if we give it to you and let you put it together, at least we hope most people have enough time to do it. We can always have a post-COVID stuffing party if, you know, we come out of it and you have to admit that you didn't get it time to get it put together. What I brought up on the screen and I'm sharing is an example of what is in each one of the individual roll books. This is for the message taker. So it's got 3 or 4 parts to it. It's got the quick, you know, what usually goes on the badge, you know, your job is, and as succinctly as could be put. And then it goes on to those critical points are expanded and given some information. Then the flow, you know, where to do stuff, some basic things about keeping yourself safe and how to check in and how to check out. The tools that should be in the book, like any forms and formed examples that need to be there. And then a little bit of discussion based on the actual role about, you know, just kind of like, if there's extra time to think about anything, additional things that might be relevant to that role. So every one of those job roles starts with this and then goes on and has the rest of those tools that were listed. I saw, okay, so I'm talking, I can't do the multitasking so good. I saw somebody either had a chat.
How about a day for arranged drive-by pickup? Oh, that's very sweet. I was planning on bringing them to you, but I don't know. We'll figure out how to get them to everybody.
And the other part that Ann and I will work out is I owe poster sets to almost everybody on the north side of the city. I got the posters distributed in the south end, went out of town, came back to COVID. So I got interrupted. And so we'll be getting you your poster sets if you haven't already gotten them too. So Ann and I will work that. And then the last thing that's in the book is something that we've had. Okay, I gotta figure out what I'm doing here. Hang on. Share, unshare, share, unshare. So at the same time, all this has been going on, the P-Patch hubs, the P-Patch staff wanted to do more training for their staff. And Anne was in the middle of trying to figure out what is the best way in the hub book to show everybody what the parts of the hub are, what's the flow of the hub. If you use our old flow chart, you know, there's like 6 versions of that out there, all of them more complicated than the last one. So we were talking to the P-Patch staff and we went, let's just try something new. So this is kind of our new stab at what are the parts in the parts of the hub and how does information go. We've learned through practicing it doesn't flow in a straight linear place. So when we did this, we also had to rename some things because it was like we had too many organizers and, you know, some rules didn't make sense the way they were named. So I'm going to walk around this and go, okay, from the greeter, you know, we have the educator who helps this. We have the information manager, who's the person who's writing on the whiteboard and taking care of the maps. So that used to be called one of the information organizers. And can you watch the chat for me? We have message takers who help in the different places that stuff needs to get written down. We have 2 roles specifically assigned to the radio team, which is the radio operator and the radio assistant, which used to be called radio message manager. And that was just such a mouthful. And again, another manager. So we just call them the radio assistant because that's really what they are, is the assistant to the radio operator. We have the hub manager, volunteer coordinator, and then this one also used to be called information organizer for the resource boards. And we just went, let's just call him the resource manager. So there's some tweaking of the names. And then this is a way to depict what is at a hub and what you can do at a hub. And generally the order of least involvement over here, just getting information to, I need action and these people are going to be really busy over here too. So, Anne, what were the chats going on?
Nothing. It was all about distribution. And then I
okay.
told folks that we were going to put the flyer on the Google Drive. If for some reason you want to print your own.
Yeah, I thought it was on there, but you know, I think the version you've got on there is like hub number 7. So let's make it and say final.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah. Roger that.
Yeah. So if anybody has any huge concerns, this is what's going to go in the book for right now. And we can run color copies, or you can run the old flow, or you can do whatever you want in your own book. But this was just like a week and a half ago. Oh my God, we got that meeting tomorrow. What are we going to do? And this is where we ended up. So we don't mean to be running roughshod over trying to do something collaboratively, but at least it got us something that people were, that everybody kind of looked at it and went, oh, I understand it. So I'll be able to test this out in my next, whenever we do a Hub 101 and see how it's received in person, you know, of how many people are confused. So thank you for the one comment that said, this is a good improvement.
Good.
Good.
One of our thoughts was Cindy had talked about doing a big drill with just hub volunteer folks and just really pack a hub and, you know, run it hard one site to see where our bottlenecks are. And our thought had been to maybe print after that once we had this all solidified, but that, you know, with COVID, that could be, you know, that could be 2021 for all we know. So we want to get something on paper. It's nothing's concrete, nothing's, you know, it can all be modified with very little effort, and you're more than welcome to modify it yourself. You're more than welcome to take parts of this or use the whole thing or pick it apart, whatever you want to do. It's just, it's a good starting spot for a lot of people. And it's at least something in your hands.
Yeah, so good. We're seeing some good comments. If you have any tweaks or improvements, let Anne or me know. So, all right, so I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to go back to the agenda, which is somewhere.
P-Patches was next, if you were going to talk more about that.
Good. I'm close to the agenda. Yikes. Nope. I've lost the agenda. All right, well, we'll punt for a little while. So P-Patch, no, actually Hub Captain training. So I had wanted to start doing those in June, and I don't remember why. I think it was going to be April or June, And then we were, okay, we're going to do our one big drill in June. So it's kind of, well, not April. So March, April, May. So May, I give up. We have no idea when we're going to be able to do COVID. So I am just going to do I really want to get some information out for discussion. The only thing I think I'm going to ask for you guys to help me with is I'm going to do it on the second week of the month, because I know I'm in town that week, you know, and even if I'm not, it doesn't matter anymore with COVID. Tuesdays or Wednesdays, you know, and what I want to do is every month bring up a couple of topics that are going to be details that are in the Hub Manager book, or some of the secret trade secrets that some of us have gotten because we've talked to enough departments, or we've been around for some drill, or we heard gossip and we followed up on it and we learned knowledge. It's a knowledge sharing thing. And so I listed the topics that down at the bottom of the agenda. Just when you set up a hub, what are the considerations you need to think about? You know, the operational stuff that you only get to practice the one time that your hub participates in a drill. How do you onboard people? How do you do shift changes? That's a whole session by itself. I want to talk about situation reports. We kind of always gloss over those and we never really get to deep dive them. We send you an inject in a drill that says, please give us a situation awareness report, you know, and make up something, and you pretend to make it up. But let's really talk seriously about what it would take to give a coherent situation report, because as I just heard from Chad, you're going to want to be pretty accurate in depicting what your water needs are. If there's only 100,000 gallons for the entire city, if you seriously need water, you need to be able to get that information and convey that. If you don't need water, you need to be able to tell them that. Safety at the hub and volunteer safety is a topic. Shelter considerations. When we had Jill Watson out to go over the sheltering, how shelters work, and how we would do ad hoc shelters here in the communities, and we made up some tip sheets, there's been a lot of new people who've joined since then. So I'd like to go back through that whole thing and talk the logic of that. We have a whole section in the Hub book about fatalities, and that's a whole bunch of new people who don't know anything about that. Hopefully, a little later in the year, the city's earthquake planning will start to gel up a little bit, and we can talk about some of the details, like came out talking to Chad, like, oh, really? That's how SDOT's going to clear the roads? They're going to throw it up on my yard? Good, I'm glad I learned that, you know. And then follow on from some of the psychology first aid dealing with difficult people and situations. So I am going to ask you in the chat, just write your choice is the second Tuesday or Wednesday. So just type Tuesday or Wednesday into the chat box, and I'll look at it afterwards and set the date from that. So, okay, I lost my agenda, so let me see if I can find that again. Oop.
Cindy, there was a question from Kayla about standardization. Can you scroll back a little bit in the comments and read through that real quick?
Okay, hang on. Almost got the agenda back. Jeez, I tell you, the leader has got more little Bobby View screens up here. It's impossible to keep up. Okay. Okay. I find it, but one of the things I find out as soon as I lift my cursor, it moves because people are adding stuff. Quick question though. Should we allow people to modify forms for their own hub? At what point do we start talking about document control? Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. We actually used to have a committee, a forms committee, and we could never agree. We would get to a half-page form, and some strong hub would really want to do a full-page form, and so that's just what they did. So we stopped trying to control the forms for people. Usually we have like maybe 3 examples we put out there and go, pick any one of these 3, then you don't have to do any work. But if your hub is so different that you just got to do it different, go for it. The network cannot be like a control organization. I've just given up on that, because there's just always, on top of that, there's always a better idea, and you hate to tamp down creativity. But there's that, this is why we have to do this. We have to go, well, here's all the choices that there are, you know, can we narrow it down and get rid of some of the older ones that aren't good? The situation awareness forms is a real good example of that. We made up our own. Then we found out that the Seattle Fire Department had its windshield survey set of forms. We found out that ACS created their own form. So, you know, collecting forms and reassessing them occasionally is a smart thing to do. And then she points out that we use a common language and rules so that everybody understands how things operate. That is the one attempt to say, these are the rules, what we've named them. So when I say information manager, you know, or resource manager, we all know what I'm talking about. So that is at least something we want to standardize. What Ann meant by you can tailor it is at her hub, she's got 3 additional roles that she's added in addition to the existing standing ones. And she's going to put those in the book for options for people to consider. And you may have something at your own hub that's different, but at least we have a core set that is that standard language that we should all agree on. That was a rambly answer. Sorry about that.
Something we did with this grant is I think we're going to have enough supplies for 48 of these sets. So I think that's going to cover all the active hubs and probably quite a few new hubs. So at least a new hub has something to go with, and they can modify it down the road if they want, but they're not having to scramble and kind of start from scratch. And the other thing I was going to say was those 3 optional roles, medical officer, visiting nurse, and reunification officer will be together in one binder. So you can choose to never fill the binder and throw those papers away, or throw them in a binder, throw them in your hub. It's very skinny. It doesn't take up much room. And maybe they'll be necessary, maybe they won't. Who knows?
Okay, so I'm pausing. There it is. Geez, I finally found the agenda. Boy, I had so much going on my screen there for a minute. The P-Patch Hub thing, so thank you. I saw a bunch of Tuesdays and Wednesdays going by, so I'll let you know what that ends up being with the training. Thank you to Margaret for pestering me to make sure that happened. That's a good idea, and I just got to get off the dime and do it now. So P-Patch Hubs, like we sort of mentioned, they had a break. The P-Patches, of course, had all shut down. The P-Patch staff had not been redeployed to do something else during COVID. So they kind of said, hey, quick, can you arrange that training we've been talking about, since we seem to have some time? And all 6 or 7 of their staff who run all the P-Patches were on the training session. So we walked them through a Hub 101. We did everything except make them go through some, you know, writing some messages down, because that was weird to try and do that virtually. So there's 6 or 7 P-Patch hubs that they're really going to try and bring up this year. And if I've already talked to anybody who's near a hub, I think that could be connected up with a P-Patch hub. But it was a good thing, and it's good that they're trying to help bring along that population. So hopefully we might see some more new hub captains showing up. Anything else you want to add on that, Anne?
Yeah, just one thing. There's a Brianna Edwards is on the call with us. She is the potential hub captain from Maple Leaf, and she was going to give a brief, well, I guess we can wait till the end when we do the around the room, but she was going to talk about the Maple Leaf hub and maybe some with the P-Patch.
Let's do that around the room then.
Okay, so we'll wait till later, Brianna.
Okay. Matt, I don't know, Matt, if you caught that you were going to be on the agenda to talk Slack. Is there anything you want to add about that?
I did see that mentioned, but I hadn't. I wasn't quite sure what you wanted me to cover. But yeah, it's up and running. Looks like we've got 36 people joined. So yeah, that's decent response, I think. And again, I set it so that anybody who joins is automatically added to the Slack questions channel. But if it's something that you're not familiar with, go ahead and ask me. I'm in a dozen or so different Slack groups, including work, so pretty familiar with it. And encourage people to use it. It's a good resource for persistent chat. You can reach out to people off schedule when we're not meeting and
Yep.
share
Matt?
files and information.
It is a good way for those of us who don't get to work around some of the new tools that have come up. Slack is going to be like what typewriters were to some of us. I went from handwriting to typewriters to PCs, and Slack is like the new tool that it's going to eventually probably replace email. And in fact, some of the younger people are like, don't send me email. You have to communicate with me on some other vehicle, and Slack is one of those. So it keeps you young, I gotta say, learning these tools. I am tracking between who is on our Hub Captain email list and who's joined Slack, because right now I will always use the email list to make sure basic information gets out to people. But if someday everybody's over on Slack, that relieves the burden of me feeling like somebody got left out of a message loop. But Slack is easier and better to exchange quick information and not weigh everybody down. We have not ever run into that problem again where we did 6 reply alls and blew past our 500 emails in an hour thing. That was just a very unusual circumstance. The email is still good, but Slack is a much more nimble tool for dialogue.
Yeah, if you see something on email and you want to chat about it, that would be a good thing, is to then hop over to Slack and you can do a kind of a real-time chat.
And Matt has generously been very kind about his time and, me going, what? You mean this button does what? So he has been very helpful. So take advantage of him. Any questions for Matt? I'm actually not seeing, I lost my hands up thing. So field exercise. So, okay, I got to bring up participants and everybody get ready to vote. Because it's going to give us a chance to use this new feature. You go down to the little dots along your toolbar, and there should be, you can expand it. And now your toolbar looks different than mine. I figured this out, but there should be a way for you to do thumbs up, thumbs down. And I think I put that in the agenda at the bottom.
Are you doing a poll in Zoom?
Yes. Yeah. So if you go down to on your meeting participants, I've brought up the agenda. Down at the bottom is when you get to manage participants, where you can raise your hand. They also have given these poll options. And then there's under more is a thumbs up, thumbs down. So if people can find that, what I'm wanting to do is go, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down if you think we should still target doing something before the 4th of July.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, see Anne, I can see Anne's.
Something in person, because I mean,
Yeah, something in person. Oh, this is the big field exercise. We were going to do the big field. We're talking about field exercise. Sorry.
Yeah. So if we're allowed to and it's safe, yes, sure.
Yeah, I mean, but I've had people say, even if we can have gatherings of less than 50 or less than 100, I don't feel safe. And so that's the reason for the poll. Is I'm just really curious what people feel like.
Cindy, someone said there's no thumbs down under the reaction, and there's not. I only
Yeah, I
put
don't
thumbs
have
up,
that
but
either.
that was what I felt, and that's what I had.
Really? So
I don't know where the thumbs down button is.
oh man.
You can do a Slack poll, but obviously not everyone.
No, I can't do Slack poll.
Yeah.
Do you guys have yes and no buttons?
There's usually a yes and no in chat, but I'm not seeing it here right now. Oh, if you go after your name, no, there's a more button, but that's not it. I know it's usually here. I'm just not finding it right now.
What I wonder is if it was in, if it's a function of whose Zoom account, because the meeting where I was getting to be a participant, it was a national webinar on Zoom, and I'll bet they had one of the expensive accounts that has functionality in it. And because I was going, oh, thank God I can mess around as a participant and actually see a participant screen. So that's probably what I was thinking. Well, dang. Okay.
I would
Well,
agree.
this is why we did it, so we could go, okay, well, that doesn't work anymore. I wonder,
You could do a doodle or something.
well, I just wanted to do a quick, you know, I don't want to clutter up the chat again. How about raise hands? If you would be willing to do something in person at the end of June, raise your hand up.
Cindy, mine's just more work related. But if you guys decide to do it, I'll do what I can.
Yours is, what do you mean, Karen? I'm sorry.
Oh, I would prefer not, but it's really just work related because I'm just so slammed through the school year. But if you decide to do it, I can make it happen.
Okay, this would be the end of June. Are you still going to be having a school year in June?
I will through the 17th.
Of
So,
June?
but I can, you know, in a week, we're pretty well set up.
I think it was going to be June 27th. But I was just kind of asking because I was going, oh my God, did school year moved out because of all the stuff? So I'm only seeing about 8 hands up, which says most other people are like, no, thank you very much. That's what I wanted to know. So if we do anything, we're going to do it before wave 2 of COVID in the fall. So we'll put off and think about doing something in August, maybe early September. We'll have some time, but at least I can stop worrying about pulling something off in June. That was my big thing. We can talk more next month too. Okay. And then I can do a doodle poll with some other options too. I just kind of wanted to do an assessment, so I'm done with June. Okay, the last 2 things I had were, in our leadership retreat, we came out of that. I was a little bit busy. I went out of town. COVID came, so nothing has really gotten started in any serious attempt. Matt and I especially, and Carl Leon have been having discussions about our web functions, or excuse me, our email functions, which will lead to some web administration. They're just helping me have some additional people who can run the website in case I'm out of town. But the one that needs to get going is the one that is, how will we raise money to fund the network so that we can pay next year's bills without Cindy's pocketbook? And that's the Zoom account, that's the domain name, that's miscellaneous printing, that's outreach stuff. So there was members of the committee. We had 2 sectors that weren't represented. You know, I wasn't saying that every sector had to be represented, but there was some space on the committee if anybody wanted to join. I got no offers for anyone to join. And I asked if someone would actually stand up and pull that committee together. And I got no one to offer to do that. So I'm a little perplexed about, I really want to get out of this leadership position so I can actually do more things for my neighborhood and my hub. And my 5-year get out of business plan is not moving very fast. So I'd like to have someone help step up and do something for the network, especially around the network sustaining part.
Well, there was sort of an open question about whether to like incorporate.
That was what that
new
committee
legal
was.
entity, right?
Yeah, that was what the committee, that was one of the first things that they were going to look at.
Okay.
But no, there's been no one who has said, I will steer that committee or set up the meetings. And I'm trying not to be the person who gets trapped into also running the committee. Margaret.
I think we just need to get together, call a meeting, and I have a feeling there will be leadership arising in the group. So that would be my suggestion on this.
So I have to call the meeting.
Oh, I guess I can still talk. Well, it's the challenge is we can't meet right now, so we could do a virtual, I suppose. I mean,
Yeah.
hang on, I've got some message here. I don't mind calling it. We just have to, and we've got a Zoom account, so I can do that.
I don't mind running the Zoom account. I just don't want to be the person to run the meeting.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. You said you were our resource for whatever.
Yep.
So Anne's going to run the meeting, right, Anne? She's writing to me. I don't think that's what she said.
Well, so let's put it this way. You guys know
Anne and
your
I are going to get this organized.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
okay
you.
with that.
And I believe that we still were looking for someone from the Southwest sector, and I've forgotten the other sector that was out there. So if anybody else wants to join, make sure Anne and Margaret have your names. Oh, Central West.
Gabrielle, I'll at least get started with you as well.
Okay, so Central West would be Queen Anne, Magnolia, Inner Bay. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you. So we can get that underway. That would be great. So now we are at around the room. Matt, did you have anything else you wanted to say on the website or email?
Just that it seems like from the discussions we've had that we can make it simpler and cheaper, based on my experience, and I'm happy to donate some time and technology into enabling that and provide, budget overview to whatever committee needs that information.
Great, thank you. You should have seen the discussion between he and Ian. It was like above my head on the functionality of email. So
yeah,
I'm going to lower everybody's hands. And if I did that accidentally and you were waiting to speak on something else, I assume that was the voting thing. So I pulled down everybody's hand. Unless Anne, did you have something else?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No.
Hey, did you just use your space bar to talk?
No, but thank you for reminding me that. I need to try it.
Yep. So I learned a trick from if you're on mute and all you want to do is say, okay, or yes, got it. Supposedly you press the space bar, wait a couple seconds, and you can talk. So if anybody wants to try that in around the room, that would be fun to do. So that's where we're at. We're going to do the same way we did it last time, which is north across, central across, south across. So get ready, northwest sector. And if you've got anything, go ahead, make sure you give your name so Gabrielle captures it for the minutes, name and hub, and then a brief. Oh, we got 15 minutes. So go now, northwest sector. Anybody in the northwest sector?
Social repairs.
Okay.
We don't have anything to really report.
Okay, it's sort of like, I guess I should have said.
Finney Ridge, St. John United Hub. We're not doing a lot just because it seems like there's so many other places people can get information. The one thing we have done is loan one of our pop-up shelters to the hot meal program that's run by the Finney Neighborhood Association, but operates a couple days a week out of St. John United. Because St. John United also has a share shelter and we're allowing them to shelter in place. So now the hot meal program has to serve outside. They can't serve inside. So they're using our pop-up shelter to stay out of the rain while they're serving food to folks. So that's
Okay.
our one action.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? Northwest. And if you actually, oh, I'm sorry. And if you I'm just going to say, well, I've got the yellow thing around me. If you don't have anything, it's okay to just not say anything. So that's fine too. Sorry, Jack.
Okay, yeah, this is Jack, the Finney Hub at the PNA Center. We've been working to set up a diagram of our area where we're going to be where we would set up our hub. And we're going to start gathering information from different sources, which is why I was really happy to hear that these booklets are going out that you developed on descriptions of different positions. So we can incorporate that and generate our site-specific setup and operation manual for the to go on our hub box. And then in the future, we're trying to besides develop more interest in active participation, set up a date for rebuilding one of our storage areas. That's it.
Okay. Last call, Northwest. Northeast.
Hi, this is Sandy Motzer from Lake City Hub. We had gotten on quite a roll before COVID in terms of trying to mobilize our the groups around Lake City to work together in earthquake and isolation, and we've sort of put that on hold. It's just been too much, I think, for people to think about. We have a lot of social service agencies that are really struggling. There's a lot of food insecurity out here, so we're putting everything on hold until we can regroup.
Okay. Anybody else Northeast?
I'll go. Couple things. I wanted to show you what a blivet was because I had no idea. So there you go. And then a question for Shill Shoal. Does this yellow and black flag thing mean something? It was on your flyer. Kristen?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that is a quarantine flag.
Get out. Okay.
Yeah, leave it to the sailors.
Yeah, I should have known you guys would have
long
something.
standing.
Nice. I get it. Navy stuff. So a couple things from Victory Heights. We had I tried to get block watch and keep in mind that I also do a lot of community building because I'm retired and I have time. So tried to get the block watch captains together. That was not very successful. They don't want to come out of the woodwork. We did have a community meeting that was more successful. We happen to have hand sanitizer in our hub, 2 big, like 64-ounce bottle squirt pump things. So we gave one of those to a public health clinic that's near us. We also bought them flowers and made up a small little banner for them just because it was National Public Health Awareness Week. And then I think we might be working with the Northeast District Council, which Gabrielle, who's on the call, coordinates. So we may be working with them on just building community, building cohesion. We haven't done much at all with disaster preparedness. It all has been very much building community and trying to get people to wave to their neighbors and get to know who their neighbors are. And that's kind of been it for Victory Heights and the north side.
All right. Anybody else there? Okay.
I'm Northeast Seattle, and I'm not official. So my name is Brianna, and I live in Maple Leaf, and we are starting the Maple Leaf emergency hubs. We're working to get 2 of them. We had made great progress before COVID, but like everybody else, everything's on hold. But we're hoping to have 2, one on the north end, one on the south end, and we've secured $2,500 in funding already through a GoFundMe through the neighborhood, and then and we're looking to get some grant matching through the city. And we were going to have our launch party in the summer at our Maple Leaf summer social, ice cream summer social. However, it looks like we might be tabling that. We haven't made the official decision on the board yet at the community council, but we are all kind of anticipating that it's likely going to be canceled. So
yeah, bummer.
Move forward from there.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome, Brianna.
Thanks.
Anybody else Northeast?
We don't have, I don't have anything.
Okay.
Ravenna is, I've got a finalized inventory. I think I asked you about some details for the toolkits and the office supply kits, and so I've got some replacement parts, and we're gonna work on funding that, but we haven't had a chance to meet.
Super. Anybody else? Okay, Central West.
Yeah, this is Bill Fay with the Queen Anne Hub, as well as speaking for the Magnolia Hub. Frank Gall is still rather tied up with his wife's health. And basically all we've done here is a couple of weeks ago, we did a radio signal strength test to see how well we could talk to each other with simplex stuff. Other than that, everything else is kind of on hold, though several of us get together every day at 1 o'clock on Zoom just to share our thoughts. And so we've been talking about things, and with the spare time, we're trying to move ahead on developing our hub roll books. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to these new binders and everything else coming from Anne. And just, well, I could email you, but anything that you might want to send to Magnolia, you might as well send to me first. And then we can make arrangements. I could even maybe come by and pick it all up.
Okay.
Possibility for me too. So
Bill,
right now,
I was
Frank
just-
is kind of aside of everything, but we're on top of it. So
Yeah, I was just getting ready to email you privately saying we stole a bunch of Miqua stuff for the general hub book. So you have donated.
okay, well, you're welcome then. Other than that, hopefully we'll maybe get some new paperwork straightened out here in the coming month or so.
Great. Anybody else? Central West, I think Steve might have been the only other one who may not have anything to report.
Yes, nothing to report.
Okay. Central East. I think Lee's already given hers. I am going to say for, geez, Diane, I can't bring up her last name. She's at Jackson Place, and they were looking at a hub at the Climbing Water Pea Patch, which is a horrible location because it's on a climbing slope on a utility waterway, where of all the places you don't want to put a hub, it's right over a water main. So she got permission from Seattle Parks to put their hub in Judkins Park. So that will roll in 2 nearby pea patches and the Jackson Place people. So that one should be formalized as soon as we come out of COVID, because she's got everything but the MOA signed. Anybody else in Central East tonight? Southwest, anybody? I had 2 things and they both flitted it away from my head. Oh, well, our West Seattle COVID site is working. The other thing I'm working on is Deborah Widmer is looking, she called and she said, has the hubs ever had to develop a water delivery system that's bigger than what we use in our camping hacks, which is just a 5-gallon bucket strapped with some soap and water? They're having some water sanitation problems at homeless encampments, and they're looking to invent something. So we're working with Seattle makers to see if something can be invented. And they're trying to figure out how to springboard this and get a prototype built. And it's going to take some cost. And so she's looking at maybe we might have to talk to the community, not the hubs, but the community in general. But it was interesting that the starting point was the hubs, you know, hey, what have you guys invented? So this has been an interesting project. Anybody else in Southwest got anything going on? I can't think of anything. And then Southeast.
This is Ron. Whoops. This is Ron in Southwest or Southeast, Rainier Beach. Can you hear me, Cindy?
I can hear you.
Oh, let's see. We were going to have our first Southeast sector meeting this Monday, but we had to cancel. But we had a pretty full agenda that we really wanted to get around to, which included discussing that urban survival fair. But everything is apparently on hold. As far as Rainier Beach goes, I've set up a group on Nextdoor for the hub for Rainier Beach. But other than sharing a lot of information that Susan Sanders has been sending out from Beacon, that's pretty much it on the whole COVID crisis. So that's it.
That actually reminded me of my other item. So Ann was saying how their hub has hand sanitizer. Well, in our move materials around after the urban survival skills fairs, I have like 300 rolls of toilet paper from the last survival, and I'm hanging on to it for all you hub people. So if we get to the end of the world, you will at least also get distributed 2 rolls of toilet paper.
You're part of the problem, I see.
We had it since last summer. But I've been walking around it because it blocks my car for 2 months now, and it was like, oh, I'm gonna hide this because people will think I'm a hoarder. Anybody else in Southeast? Okay, wow, we finished right on time. It was a miracle. Is there anything else good to the order anybody's got? I think our last thing is, I see no hands going up, is that our next meeting is May. So, it was kind of nice having this monthly since it's so less hassle, not having to get a room and set it up and all that crap. Next month is going to be very interesting. John Sue is the building official for all of Seattle. He is the man in charge of getting all the inspections done of buildings so that they can be red tagged, yellow tagged, or green tagged. So he is like a critical part of the infrastructure recovery system. And I'm inviting him because they do not have a good system in Seattle. There's this miracle of, we have building inspectors who've been trained to check earthquakes, but we do not literally have a system in place to receive them, deputize them, and deploy them in an efficient manner. So he knows we're going to grill him, but it's an education for you to understand what the desired end state is and where they are in getting to that end state. So we will see you guys on May 28th. Send me any agenda items, and you'll be hearing from Ann about deliveries. Kristen, do you have your hand up?
Okay, you were asking about inventions for hand washing. Another voter thing is called a sun shower, and it's a bladder, it's fairly large, by 24 inches or something.
About 3 gallons.
It's about 3 gallons of water, and you can shut it on. You can turn it on or off, and it actually has a small
fine shower head.
It has a small shower head, a small plastic one there's a hose that comes down and a switch on it.
So part of it is black, and it absorbs sunlight heat, so you get a hot hand wash.
You hang it.
And it's just,
yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
It's actually, yeah. I wanted to tell you one good thing that happened here. And it has to do with our weekly radio program that we have been doing for several years now. And we added, about a year ago, we added kids D-Man so that the kids, and we had our first 11-year-old run almost the entire V-Man program for a half an hour. And we're pretty happy about the way that went. It was really unique. It was helpful. And I think the kids are starting to get the hang of it.
Radio skills.
And also one other thing, we've been very active with our community with regard to, I'm getting maybe 4 or 5 calls a week for clarification or help. And that's from the entire community. And
Having
so,
to do with COVID responses.
right, so we go and help people. So that's kind of the way this is working. So it's actually working the way it's intended to.
Yeah, I've been
That's
watching.
it.
I've been watching your Facebook page and your blog to see what was showing up. So, yep, good job. You kind of broke up on that, but I think I'll help Gabrielle if there was any problem catching it. But so, all right. Thank you, everybody. I don't see any other hands up.
That's it.
All right. Good night.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.
I'm going to capture the chat too.
So,